Artists and creatives, you have the power to heal, transform, and elevate lives. Are you ready to step into that power?
Hello and welcome to Superfan Attraction. I'm so excited about my guest today. We have a lot in common. We have a lot of the same passions with creativity, and I'm just going to introduce her with her bio here. So, if you want to live a fully creative life, then Dr. Marion Piper is your go-to gal. As a creativity coach and copywriter, she supports creative entrepreneurs to become their most creative selves so that they can communicate their world-changing ideas with confidence and passion. Having traveled the world and completed a swag of degrees, she's multi-passionate, obviously, including a PhD. Dr. Marion Piper is here to inspire you to percolate your pain and live in flow. We studied creativity coaching with Dr. Eric Meisel, and I love how she really focuses on dealing with trauma and mental health when it comes to creativity and what you do, because I know my clients, I think a lot of my clients, I'm drawing in artists and creatives who've had trauma, and I've been honored that I've been able to help them. Often, I'm the first person they've ever told. And that is such a privilege and honor. And so I like to learn as much as I can. So I'll probably focus my conversation on trauma and mental health when she comes on. Hello, welcome to Superfan Attraction. I'm excited to chat with you today because, I really dug deep into your website and your bios and all that. And I'm like, I kept coming across another thing that we have in common. So, for those who don't know you, why don't you give a little introduction to us for you?
I would love to. Thanks so much for having me. Podcasting is definitely one of my favorite things to do in the world. So I feel like I'm being very much indulged and luxuriated at the moment. But hello, friends, new and old. I'm Dr. Marion Piper. I'm a writer, a speaker, and a creativity coach. And I tend to play in the space that exists between creativity and mental health. So, how we can use creativity, both the process, the practice, and the product, as a way to not just, put beautiful things into the world, but as a way to deeply connect with ourselves, to heal ourselves from our trauma, and to also, I guess, build a better world. And for me, creativity is everything. It is like the thing that I think will make the biggest difference in people's lives.
So, do you work with more creatives, or you're working with other people to embrace their creativity?
And it does tend to change depending on what context and what environment I'm in. I've worked with because my background is in creative industries, and I've also worked in the visual arts. I have a sort of a spectrum of clients that sort of extend from practicing professional artists, painters, ceramicists, to people who are in creative businesses. So I'd probably call them the creative entrepreneurial type, which are the people that are, using their art for a particular audience. And then I also work with creative businesses. And more recently, I've started doing a lot of work with startups, because that space is really interesting. It's a very high pressure creative environment, kind of similar to creative agency land, like advertising agencies and design studios. And what I love so much about startups is that they're often working with ideas that have never existed before, which places a whole new, different type of demand on your creative spirit and energy and body. So that's sort of where I've been focusing a bit of attention lately. But yeah, honestly, probably my favorite people to work with are the ones that used to be creative when they were younger. Maybe they were the art kid at school, they hung out in the music room. And then for whatever reason, when they left school, maybe they didn't have the right people around them to sort of say, hey, go for it, chase that creative career. Or maybe they just had other interests. They go and they live their lives, maybe 10, 15, 20 years has passed. And then all of a sudden they get this whisper. They get this little whisper that comes in, sort of in the back of their mind of reminding them who they are, reminding them of their creative nature, and they sort of coming back to the practice as an adult, maybe they've got kids as well that they want to involve in it. So those people I find when they're on that journey. And oftentimes, actually, it's because, a big disruption has happened. There's been a big challenge or a big trauma, and they're sort of rediscovering who they are through the lens of creativity. That's sort of like, probably if I would think of an ideal client, that's probably my person.
I think we all have to kind of make time for creativity and time away from whatever your job is. Even if you are an artist, I always encourage artists to explore something that's not their art, but some other art. And I think because I'm multi-passionate and a lot of, I would work with musicians, I would work with actors and artists, but I found like when they're in those industries, they don't really cross. They kind of stay in their own lane. And I'm always like, you know what? A musician can learn so much from an actor and vice versa. And so go explore something that's not your norm, and it will add to your creativity. So I think that's probably what you do of someone that doesn't even do this for a living, to be able to explore their creativity in different ways.
One of the things that I always say, particularly if people are feeling creatively blocked and they're sort of sitting with whatever they're trying to make and they're hammering and nothing's happening, or they're going around in circles, just to sort of further amplify your point about cross-pollination between different art forms, what I usually encourage people to do is to go and take instruction. So if you are someone who, you're working on a body of work, whatever that might be, whether that's a business or whether that's, a series of paintings, if you go and take a class in something completely different, like improv, like maybe you join a choir, I don't know, anything, what that does is that it takes your brain's focus off the problem that you're having with what you're working on, and it re-engages it into the creative process. And literally every single time someone does that, and it happens to me too, whenever I go and step outside of my wheelhouse and go and try something new, the next time I come back to my work, everything flows, and it flows so much quicker because I've given my brain an opportunity to rest and to not have to consciously focus on what I'm working on, because our brains are always creating. They're always working in the background. They're always connecting the dots. It's always like firing and wiring in new different ways. And so the more of those new experiences you can have, the better your primary creative practice is going to be, because it'll be infused by all those different things.
Yeah. And is it more individuals that would come to you, or is it more companies, or both?
I do both. I have been offering one-on-one sessions just to individuals for the past probably two and a bit years. But more recently, I've been running sort of smaller group style workshops in businesses. I do a lot of speaking in corporates. So particularly around creative teams. So I've worked with a few big startups here in Australia with their design team, who, they have these big, like full cross company wide meetings. And I've sort of come in and, inspired and educated and just reminded them of, what's kind of the most important thing, which is the creation itself. Because I think the difference between individuals and businesses is that for business, there's so much politics involved. There's like a politics of creativity. because it's been commercialized and you have so many different people's agendas that are weighing in on what you're making. There's so much more distraction, and you have to be aware of all those different dynamics happening. Whereas personally, you do have like a personal politics of creativity, but generally it tends to be a little bit more specific. Whereas the business version is a little bit more broader and general. But for individuals, what I see, the biggest thing that is sort of weighing on their mind is it's either what will people think, and by people it's usually my family. Whereas for businesses, it's like how do I perform higher so I keep my job, or how do I contribute in a way that is fulfilling to me but doesn't burn me out. So you kind of got they're very similar energies, but slightly different outcomes and paths to get there.
Yeah. And so I'm curious to hear a bit about your journey, like where you started and how you got to where you are now. I know it's always like a long answer, but I love it. I love hearing the whole journey. Like, so maybe how did you get into this? What was your first thing that you wanted to do? Because I know you're multi-passionate, so you've done a lot of training, and so I would love to hear about your journey.
Oh man, I look, I'm like you. I love this question. I love hearing everyone's origin story, because I think it helps you to understand just how much goes into, being a human, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I always knew from, the second I was conscious that I was going to have a creative career, that I was going to be someone who played in the realm of creativity. When I was younger, I used to, create all these little cutouts, and I was terrible at drawing when I was younger. Much better at now, but terrible at drawing. And so I would create all these little characters, and I would create these worlds that I would just occupy myself for hours. And as an only child, I had a really rough upbringing. So creativity was really an escape for me. And it was my refuge from, a lot of the stuff that was happening around me, which was, broken home. My mum is an alcoholic. We moved a lot, so I really needed to give myself that sense of certainty from a really young age, which is, looking back on it, because it was just what I went through, it felt really normal. But looking back on it, I was like, wow. And this is kind of what led me to do my PhD project, which we can dig into in a sec.
Yeah.
But looking back on it, I was like, how did I even know to do that? And so I think for me, there's always been this like really deep internal desire and calling to do creative work, particularly in the realm of self-expression. How do I translate what is happening inside of me into something that not just makes sense to other people, but that can forge a connection? Because I was so isolated growing up. But then when I was, and this is so random, when I was like 15, 16, I announced to my high school art teacher, who was a really good friend and still is a really good friend now, I said I wanted to be an art critic. Don't really know where that came from, but I wanted to write about art and write about other people's self-expression. And so, we started to look into universities, and I ended up moving from, a small regional town in the sort of mid-east coast of Australia down to Melbourne, which is where I am now. And I studied creative arts at uni. I blasted through all of their art theoretical units of study, like in like a year and a half. And they were like, you have to pick a practical major now, because there's no other subjects left for you to do. So I ended up specializing in photo media and fell in love with digital video installations. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll become like a video artist, which was like really hot in like the early 2000s. It was like the kind of the crescendo of that particular art form. And so I did that. I ended up doing an honors year as well. And then I got the travel bug and sort of traveled around. And when I distinctly remember this moment when I was on a beach in Brazil with one of my best friends, and I turned to her. We're in the water. It's beautiful backdrop, like as sunny, stunning. And I felt so free and so open. And I actually said, I want to be a writer. Actually, that is the thing that has been the through line through everything that I've done. And I think I was probably 23 at the time. We so I sort of set out on a course to go, okay, well, how can I become the writer that I envisage? So I ended up doing a master's in writing, and then ended up getting a job as a copywriter working in a creative agency. And so I built a commercial skill for writing whilst I was also exploring a creative skill for writing. And so it's been very much the parallel between those two things. And along the way, I've done so many other amazing creative jobs. Like I've had the absolute fortune to work in an art gallery. I worked in a US summer camp teaching video to high school kids. Shout out to Bucks Rock. Absolutely beautiful place. And so I kind of was on this journey, and then I got really, really burnt out in 2019 from all this agency work and being on all the time and having that pressure to create. And so I ended up leaving my last agency job, and I was like, right, I'm going to start a business. And then, the pandemic hits, and I basically was flat out for 2.5 years. I didn't stop. I didn't take a holiday. Because as a copywriter, when the pandemic hit, everybody was trying to get online. Nobody knew how to talk to their customers about it. And so I was so blessed. Like I just had so much work coming in. And then that also created more issues because I got more burnt out. And then sort of through that journey of business and, also I should sort of backtrack a little bit. In 2017, I finished my PhD project. Running a business and doing a PhD, I can see so many similarities between the two, because you're really on your own. You really got to make your own decisions. You've really got to be the one to decide what direction you're going to take, who your work is for, who you're going to speak to, what specific one thing you want people to be able to like take away with and grow and learn from you. And so I was like, yes, writing is the channel and the medium through which I work, but the thing at the heart of everything was creativity. And it's sort of interesting to me that I've seemed to have this every sort of 7 to 10 years. I have this like really deep, clear insight around the thing that I'm here to do. And that's when I sort of started in 2021 was when I started to explore this idea of like, well, okay, what would a life look like? What would a business look like if creativity was at the center of everything that I did? Not just writing, but, the actual process and self-expression and how that manifests in different ways, in different contexts. And so that's when I sort of stumbled into the work of Dr. Eric Maisel, who I did my creativity coaching training with, who is just the most wonderful human being. And I still feel I have lots of complicated feelings about the word coach, especially as a creative. And so, because in my head, at least, they're very, they're kind of at odds with each other because they require a different way of being in the world. So I've been living in that tension. Pardon me. I've been living in that tension for the last couple of years, trying to figure out how to reconcile those two things. And it's been wild. When I made that decision to go all in on creativity as the kind of the driver for my business, it's incredible the kinds of opportunities and doors that have opened up by announcing that, and I think definitely one of the things that I reflect on if I look back at all the things I've been able to achieve, it's really because I showed up and I announced and said, this is what I want to do. And I found the people to help me. I found the opportunities, and so I think as creatives, as artists, we forget that the world is ready and the world is hungry for what we want to produce, and that there is space. But we have to be the ones to go first. We have to be the ones to put our foot out, open the door and say, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm available. And you need to step out of the studio to do that. And so oftentimes I find, one of the biggest things, and I'm guilty of this myself, is I spend all this time creating, and then I forget that I actually have to make that transition to come back out into the world again and share what I've created, because that kind of closes the loop on everything that we make. So my journey has been one of just pure chaos at times, amazing joy, and I'm sure everyone, we all have our ups and downs. But if I sort of look back, and if I look at the person I am now compared to where I sort of came from, it's like I just can't believe that's possible. So whenever I feel like there's no opportunities, or things are really slow, I think about that little girl and I go, oh my God, like if I can pull myself out of that situation and that hole, like everything's going to be fine. Like whatever's coming, I can handle it.
Yeah. And I'm interested that you talk about mental health and trauma and its connection to creativity. And I'm curious about that too, because I think I just happen to draw to me. A lot of my clients have trauma. Like everyone has trauma, but I tend to attract the ones that have had serious like childhood trauma. And I'm honored that a lot of times I'm the first person they've ever even told things to. And I help them through that and how it connects to what they do and why they do what they do. So I'm curious, how does that translate into your work? And whatever your thoughts are about that, do you find that more artists have trauma than other people, or how does that work?
Yeah. Oh man, it's so interesting to me, because I thought that was one of my fears, um, stepping into this role of the creativity coach, or even talking about what I've been through and trauma so openly, is that I thought that's what would happen to me, and I worried that I didn't have the capacity to hold that space of people, and what that would do to me, as a human bearing witness to that. But also, I didn't want to put anyone else in a situation where they were being open and vulnerable and raw, and they couldn't get the support that they needed. So but that's definitely not been the case, and it's been really interesting, I think, because of the way that I talk about trauma. I don't talk about and I very much lean on the work of Dr. Gabor Mate here, in that talking about trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. And an extension of that, so my research that I did, my PhD project, really dug into the concept of post-traumatic growth, which is the more positive cousin of PTSD, which tends to show up in people in 5 distinct ways. In that they tend to have deeper relationships with the people around them. They have a deeper sense of their own spirituality, a greater sense of their own strength, their own personal strength. They have a greater appreciation of life, and they have the capacity to see new possibilities. And so talking about this concept it's attracted people who have been through significant trauma, but they're actually at a stage themselves where they're at that tipping point between, I've been through this thing, but there's been enough time that's passed that I feel like I'm functioning, I'm okay, I'm good. But I want to do something with this pain. I don't want to just be stuck with it. I don't want it to be something that holds me back, but I'm actually ready to create, and I'm ready to create from that place, with not ignoring it, not pushing it aside, not pretending it didn't happen. But I want to use my pain and my trauma as fuel to do something good in the world. So that's a really empowering place to be. And I actually find that people who aren't ready to do that, they really don't like, they really don't like the way that I talk. They don't like the message that I put out there, because they're just not ready to hear it. And so one of the things that there's so many ways that creativity and trauma are connected. And I think one of the things that, and, Rick Rubin talks about this a lot, is that, this idea of the artist's antenna. And I think creative people, artists, people who are kind of born with that natural curiosity, or at least it's encouraged from a really young age, they're way more sensitive to the world and the environment. And the problem with that is that it leaves you open to experiencing things way more deeply and personally than people who don't have that same sensitivity. And so I think that's why a lot of artists end up, experiencing trauma, and sort of, that becomes their driving force, because they're just so sensitive. So that you have this spectrum of different types of trauma that could happen. You have, your big T trauma, which is the stuff that, changes your worldview. It shatters your worldview. It breaks you. It like tears everything down. Then you have on the other end, you have the small T trauma, which are the challenges and obstacles that happen, but they're the ones that just affect you personally. Then they don't shatter your worldview. They don't break you apart. However, the small T traumas are the ones that are going to add up over time, and they can actually be way more damaging for people if they don't learn how to manage stress and anxiety and fear. And so it's oftentimes why, you'll see people who have seemingly had the most, loving upbringing. They went to the right schools, they got married, they had the family. But over time, they never developed the skill, or they were never exposed to enough of a challenge to learn how to cope with it. And so the people that I worry for the most in this world are the people who've never experienced a big trauma, because they're the ones that it's going to affect the most, because they haven't built up that skill to learn what to do with it. And that's where I think creativity can make the biggest difference, because what it does, the creative process itself, is it pushes you into this space of like deep discomfort and challenge, and it forces you to look at things differently. So it in itself shares a lot of qualities with trauma. They kind of mirror each other in different ways. And so if we can expose more people to a creative process where, it's not just the happy, I get to paint a painting and, draw that. But if we can expose them to things where they're going to fail, things are going to break. And this is why I love ceramics so much. And this is why pottery is a really brilliant medium for people who, want to experience that. Because like, if you've ever sat at a pottery wheel, it is very humbling. Like, it is a very, very humbling experience. Especially then when you get things fired and they crack and they break and they explode. Like all of that challenge that, that you can put yourself through in a really safe and nourishing environment with creativity. That's what I believe, and I know deeply bolsters me for the things that are unexpected, that are going to come, because like nobody gets out of this stuff alive. Like trauma is coming for us all. So it's not really about like, what will I do when it happens? But it's like, how can I prepare myself for when it does inevitably arrive?
Yeah, that's so interesting that you're talking about how people that have not had that big trauma, you worry more for them. And I guess that makes sense because, like, the ones that have had more of a bigger trauma, we're resilient. We're just like, we keep going no matter what. And we're used to it, and we can kind of recover from it a little bit faster. But yeah, if you haven't really experienced it, then little things can add up over time. Yeah, I studied with Eric as well, for creativity coaching. Did you do any other kind of coaching programs, or was that the main for coaching?
I mean, I've had a coach since I started my business. I've definitely believed in the value of it in different parts of my life. But no, I've just done Eric Masel's training. I've done like, I haven't done a coaching certification, like a life coaching certification or anything. I kind of figure, and I'm very conscious of the fact that I am a lifelong learner, and I can actually use education and learning as a way to procrastinate from doing the work that I know I need to do. So I'm very, very conscious of not taking on
Yep,
too
I can
many
see that.
other people's opinions and things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So but I would love to. Like, I love, I just recently went to a Tony Robbins event here in Sydney. And I love being in that environment. I love being around, people who are, obsessed with personal development and growth. And, there's just something that's so, the momentum that you can build from those kinds of environments are really, really wonderful, particularly for creativity and creative practice. And I think, I'll eventually do I'll eventually do another coaching certification. I think that will really help me get over the fear of calling myself a coach, um, when I've actually, been certified to
Yeah.
do it. But I would love to do it in an immersive way. I don't just want to do it online. I would love to go to a place for, like, kind of like how yoga teachers go. They might go to Bali and do an immersion for like 30 days
Yeah.
to get their teacher training certification. I'd
Yeah.
love to do that for coaching or anything really, because like immersion is like the absolute best thing for learning. So that's definitely on the horizon.
Yeah. And I think also, like, I learned that the certification, it doesn't mean anything. I think when I first started into coaching, it's like, I felt like, okay, everyone kind of says, oh, you need to be certified. You need to be certified. Okay. And so I was like looking at, there's all kinds of things online, and there's a world of education and that I could do online. But I went to what seemed like a legit coaching program to get certified. But so I did that as my first thing, but then I just dove into all this I discovered online courses, and I took a course on anything and everything I could possibly find because I was obsessed. And so I also relate to what you said about very aware that you could dive in and be endlessly learning and not actually go and do stuff. It holds you back. But yeah, that's how I got my coach training. And I say I learned way more from all those other like courses. Some of them were just on Udemy that cost like $15. I learned more from those than that legit certification. So and and then once you do start coaching, nobody cares that you've been certified. Like, nobody cares. So it's more what you can help people with. But yeah, that's interesting to be very aware of that. I'm starting to be aware of that now, because I used to be the one that would sign up for every 5-day challenge, and now I'm like, no, no, I got to do my own thing. I got to actually do some work with what I'm learning before I learn more, But yeah, it's when you're a lifelong learner, we just love to learn new things, and we crave it. But it makes us, I feel like that's your certification, is that you've continuously added to your knowledge and skills, and that's how you can better help people.
Yeah, what you're tapping into, and there's a whole body of research around the value of lived experience as a knowledge base, and I think as creative people, as artists, our greatest asset is our creative practice. It's the hours that we spend tinkering and ideating and moving through those really complicated emotions and feelings that come along with this moving an idea from just the ether into 5D reality. So and this one of the things that often happens with creative people is that they feel like they don't have enough skills. I don't feel like my work is strong enough, and or I had it like there's the comparison that kicks in, and then that forces people to go and take more courses and sign up for more workshops, when really the way that you get better, the only way that you get better, is by creating. And so whenever I feel all of those comparisons and I get tripped up in like, well, what does this thing need to be called? What shape does it need to take? Like, is it a book? Is it a course? Is it a whatever? I go, hang on, whoa. Let's just back things up. How about I just start making it, and I will trust that I'm going to figure out the form it needs to take along the way, rather than trying to start with the end in mind and forgetting that things are created by actually creating them. So it seems
Yeah.
really dumb and really simple, but that's actually how you get better. And then if you get to a point where you're like, actually, I don't know how to do that, that's when you need to take the course. You don't need to take the course
Yeah.
before you've started creating. You take it when you need it, rather than just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, and then by doing it, you realize if there are gaps in your knowledge or gaps in your experience that you can, oh, okay, I need to go learn that, whether it's a course or a book or, there's the internet's a wonderful world of information. So I always say, like, there's tons of free and low cost things that you can absorb and learn online. So what do you do in your day to day? What does that look like? Because you're a copywriter, you're a coach,
Oh, good question.
you have a podcast, you work with companies. What is your kind of, do you have a priority of a focus of one thing that you mainly do, or is it a different every day?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there are some certain staples to my day that if I don't do them, I'm an absolute mess and nothing else gets done. Because when you work for yourself, or in a small business, there's really you have to be the one to put the guardrails up. Like, there's really no guardrails to your day. Like, if I start the day distracted, the day is basically gone. So I have to really be really intentional and conscious about how I tee up my day. Because I also get really overwhelmed if I have too many options of things to do. So I kind of have to make decisions ahead of time to just put some constraints in place to make sure I actually do things. But for me, the non-negotiables are I probably like 4 out of 7 days, 4 to 5 out of 7 days, I go to the gym first thing in the morning. I go to a group exercise. For me is like been an absolute game changer. And so I'm there at 6:30 in the morning. It's the same group of people. We have just like the best time, and it is the most empowering and strengthening way to sort of start my day. And I'll typically either journal if I wake up really early, which sometimes happens. Sometimes I'm up at like 4:35 just because my brain is like, we're ready to go. I will journal before I go to the gym, or I journal when I get back from the gym. Journaling is every single day. I can count on 2 hands the number of days I've missed in the last like 6 years. It's not that many. So journaling for me is like the anchoring practice to everything. And probably if I were to think about my favorite creative practice, journaling is definitely the number one. And then my days really do vary. Like some days, like if I take today, for example, I'm recording this podcast with you. I'm speaking a keynote tomorrow on Saturday at a conference. So I've got to finish off my slides, which I'm going to do after we're wrapped up here. And then I've got some emails to respond to sort of set up some workshops. And then yesterday, actually, I did like a short-term 1-week contract with a creative agency just while their copywriter was on holidays. So it really does vary quite a bit. And just when I think, if I'm sort of looking ahead to my calendar and I'm like, oh, like November's looking pretty open. And, we're halfway through October now. Oh, November's looking pretty open. Maybe that'll be some time I can stop to sort of create these other things that I want to put together. I'm in the process of creating an audio only journaling course. I suppose it's a course, workshopy type course for people, because I've been running these live sessions, which have been really, really great, but I've been struggling to find the right time to run it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take all that content, put it into something that people can do on their own. And then I've just had some branding done, so I need to redo my website. So there's stuff there's always something to do. And then in amongst that, I always try throughout the course of the week, I try to get to sort of 2 or 3 different events, whether that's an online event, whether that's a networking event, just so I can sort of meet more people, because I think that's really important. Opportunities come from people, not businesses. So I'm always out there, showing up and trying to meet, potential new clients and get things going that way. But yeah, and then if I sort of look to the end of my day, typically the way that runs down is I usually spend my evenings, because I'm thankfully single and I don't have kids, so I actually have lots of time, and I'm very grateful for that. So I typically will spend my evenings engaging in some kind of wind down creative practice. At the moment, I have a puzzle going, which I don't know, you can kind of see on the table behind me. And then I sort of from 8 o'clock, all devices go off, and that's my sort of wind down time. And that's usually when I'll read or draw or sort of just like think and let whatever needs to come out of my brain come out of my brain. But yeah, I love the fact that my life is so random, and I've actually worked out that the more random it is, the better it works. So if things get too predictable, nothing works. So I try as much as I can to keep every day as not as open, but I have an idea of what I want to get done, but I don't pin it down. I don't like time block or do any of that stuff that people tell you to do. I just go into it with the intention of getting things done, and things just seem to happen. So yeah, that's kind of how my life functions by not functioning.
Right. It's because this is Superfan Attraction, it's personal branding and promotion. So what would you say would be the things that you do that help you attract your people the most? Is it the podcast? Is it going to events? Is it going to,
I
is
love
it
this.
social media?
Yeah. I used to think it was about the work. So I used to think if I do good work, the clients will come. Or like if I put all my energy into doing the best work possible, and sure, that is absolutely part of the equation. But it wasn't until I actually started owning um, a message and a message that I embodied. So I always think about this idea of like, what hill do I want to die on? What thing would I champion until I was blue in the face? And when I started owning that and owning my own story and then talking about those, so it's really been in my content, in my podcasting, and in my speaking that I've seen the fastest and most on point attraction of my tribe, because I think because I go back and forth in my head about this, and I do test and try things out a lot. And I think that's part of it, right? You got to be like not afraid to just bomb, to just not like I'm going to try a
Yeah.
message, and if it bombs, if it tanks, that's fine. But you got to try to know.
Yeah.
And so I think early on, I really emulated and tried to follow what people were doing in the industry that I liked, or that I thought I tried to basically copy the things that I was attracted to in the market. And all that did was it just made me feel like an imposter, because I couldn't quite do it the same way that they were doing it. And it felt like kind of unnatural and a bit awkward and a bit clunky. And I would attract people who also liked that other, what those other people were doing, but they weren't exactly my people. So I had to really take a step back and go, okay, like if I were to do this in my way, and how I write and how I speak, like what would that look like? What do I love talking about? What are the things that I am so obsessed about? Because obsession, and I think obsession has a really bad rap because it's often tied to addiction and, and to like workaholism and all those terrible things. But I don't hear people talk about the positive side of obsession much, and the energy that obsession creates. Like I am so obsessed with journaling, and I talk about it all the time, that the people that I attract are not necessarily also people that are like that, but they're the people that want to be like that, right? So I kind of think like, okay, like what other things am I obsessed about? And so I get really weird and unhinged about it, and that attracts really interesting people. So it's like, and it's all those little obsessions, they're the things that make me different and unique. And I think when you find the things that make you different and unique, you can't help but attract your people, because they're looking for it just the same as I'm looking for it too out in the world. So but yeah, I think probably, yeah, if I were to say like the thing that's made the biggest difference is really looking at the people out in the world doing the things that I love, that I'm attracted to, and trying to find a way to partner with them, trying to find a way to work with them, trying to find a way to leverage their audience too. Because if I like them so much, then their people are probably also going to love me. And a case in point of that is there's this amazing group of people here in Australia called the Finders Keepers, and they run these incredible arts and craft and creative small business markets in all the capital cities. And they were hosting a creative business summit earlier in the year. And I was like, oh my God, like I need to speak. I need to go. First, I need to go to that summit because I know that my people will be there. But secondly, I need to be a part of it. Like I don't just want to be in the audience. I want to contribute to make this thing better. So I literally just pitched them a cold email and was like, hey, we don't know each other, but we need to, because XYZ. And, you're that one of the panelists was someone whose podcast I'd been on. And so I sent them the episode. And so I think it's about like, especially for those kinds of opportunities, it's like looking at what commonalities you have rather than just being like, can you help me because I want to be a speaker? It's like, actually, how can I contribute my best self to what you're trying to build? And people love that. Like that's the surefire way to, to get in, to get in with someone, is if you can show how you can add value and contribute. So it's been a journey, like trying to understand this. And I've done so much work on myself and my message in order to try and like hone it down into something that is easy enough for people to remember, so that then they can then pass that on for me. So it's not like I just woke up one day and I was like, this is who I am. It's like, no, actually I had to like consciously think about it.
Yeah, that's why I always say that personal branding begins with personal development, because you have to know what you're marketing first, and really getting to know what's unique about you, and sharing your story. And especially artists tend to think, oh, my art can speak for myself, as long as I do the work, like how you were saying. But there's more to it than that. You got to share who you are authentically. And because even if I'm buying like a painting, I still want to know, well, who is the artist? What's their story? I want a connection. And that's going to make me want to buy it more than just, oh, I like this art. And so I love that. And yeah, just figuring out what's unique about you and sharing your story. I love it. So what is your why?
Oh, just straight in there. What is my why? I believe that creativity has the power to save us over and over and over and over again, but we must be willing to let go of control. And so I think my why is really around helping people understand that there's always another way and that we can find it together. And I'm really deeply driven by this like internal burning desire to express. And I really think the reason why anything gets made is because somebody else has that too. They have this desire to change something, to make something better. I innately think that we are wired to create. And if you look around at everything in the world, like from, this computer that I'm looking at to, literally everything else behind me, it has been created by someone at some point. Some human brain said, we need this, or, this will solve this problem. So I think my why and my how and my what are all kind of like the same thing. It's all about how, creativity is really the life force that drives everything, and it's both the poison and the antidote. So, it's not as simple as just, be creative and everything gets better. No, it's like when you make that decision to create, you are taking radical responsibility for your role in the world. And I think if more people understood that they actually do have that agency and that power, like the kind of world that we would live in would be so different. And that's the world that I want to live in. That's the world that I'm trying to build.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. So where can people find you online if they want to connect with you? You have a podcast, where all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I generally loiter most on Instagram at Marion Piper Creative. My website is also marionpipercreative.com. The podcast is called What Doesn't Kill Us. And you can also find me on LinkedIn if you're like more businessy and that's where you hang out. I'm just Marion Piper on LinkedIn. You'll see me. There's a photo of me in a pool holding a book. It's very crazy. But yeah, and I encourage people to reach out. My DMs are always open, and I love talking about this stuff, as you can probably tell. So please don't be shy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been so interesting to hear your views on everything. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's been an absolute treat.
Thanks for watching Superfan Attraction. If you enjoyed this episode and all that you're learning, be sure to subscribe to the channel. To connect with me, I'm Diane Foy Arts on all socials and in the Superfan Attraction group on Facebook.